Let's talk about the Blazers. I went to bed and they were up 20 points. I woke up and found that they had choked away a 20-point lead.
23.
I think it got higher at the second quarter. Like, there was a moment where it felt like it was almost 30.
When did the lead start to trickle away?
Late third quarter.
Late third, fourth. When
they
Ant
were
went out.
Up 15 going to the fourth.
Yeah. Give me a second here. I'll look at it. But I feel like there was a moment where they were like 26 in the second. Anyways, I woke up. They lost to the Pistons. So that was nice to wake up to. Anthony Simons rolled his ankle. A bunch of guys didn't play. But Jeremy Grant scored 49 points. We had the trade deadline. Delano Banton. Big Delano Banton from the Boston Celtics is who we acquired.
Hey, he brings championship pedigree. Like, they're on a run right now.
He does. He knows what it's like to win. He's watched Jason Tatum from afar. The pride of Nebraska, as one of our listeners told me. And that was the big move for the Blazers on deadline day. I did sign off on the show saying they're probably doing nothing, and they did something, but you could still argue they didn't do anything. Delano Banton is the guy. Joe Cronin holding a press conference before they choked away that Piston game. And here was Joe Cronin summing up the trade deadline.
Quick review of the trade deadline. Very content with how it went. Like the way the team is playing. We've been extremely active and transactional the last 2 years. Wanted to give these guys a chance to settle in, gel, connect.
They have been active and transactional. Last deadline, they traded away their good players, one of which they gave a mid-level to who conned us into the contract, and we got duped. Josh Hart got traded, and then, of course, the Dame stuff. So standing pat pretty much with the roster, wants to allow these guys to play together. He then went on to talk about the offers he had, because he's got guys of value in this league.
Sure, the big talk's Malcolm Brogdon. You going to move him? Jeremy Grant, obviously, although that's kind of settled a little bit of late.
Yeah, Grant seems to like it here. He just had a kid. It's mellow. He's got familiarity. The organization likes him
every night.
Absolutely, gets his shots, gets his buckets. And there was some talk of Malcolm maybe being moved. I thought when the Knicks got Bogdanovich, that was a pretty clear indicator they'd moved on. Here was Joe talking about the offers.
Yeah, received lots of offers. I think it did make it somewhat more difficult to pry from us because we are happy with who we have and where we're at. So, of course, we always want to be opportunistic and, not just be thorough in this market, but have a great feel for what our options are and what's available. And, in any transaction, you're just evaluating whether this is a good move for you or not. And all the discussions we had this time around, we chose to pass on them.
So passing for now, largely the deadline was a general dud, not just for the Blazers, basically for the league. Buddy Hield went to the Sixers. P.J. Washington went to the Mavs. We mentioned Bogdanovich. Those are the three biggest players traded yesterday.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, you know the league better than I do. So, please, by all means, tell me to shut up. It feels like the gap between the haves and the have-nots is pretty big right now.
Shut up. Swag, what did you think of the deadline? I'm just kidding.
What big name is available? Who's got a great name that is going nowhere, that is very much ready to let them go?
Well, DeJounte Murray was maybe the biggest name involved in most of the conversations because the Lakers have been a disaster and because the Hawk thing with Young and DeJounte, it's they don't have chemistry. They don't play well together.
There's no Aaron Gordon. You know what I mean?
I just said DeJounte Murray.
Is that an Aaron Gordon?
You can make an argument he's better than Aaron Gordon.
Okay,
yes.
fair then. So then there's one. And I think that's what it is, that you're lacking a lot of those. So it doesn't make sense to put all in for guys that aren't really worth what they probably cost at a deadline to make a run.
I think what we saw, too, was a bad draft looming. And also the cap's going to be restructuring to its new position. So there's a lot of financial uncertainty and how are they going to navigate it, who's making what. It just felt like a laid back deadline, not only for what you're saying of who was the biggest name, but also no interest in this draft. And let's see where we're at financially in the summer, and then we maybe get aggressive and make them move.
Yeah, and there were some teams, the Wizards had some guys they needed to move off the books, but
yeah, Kuzma didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, teams that maybe in the past would have added stuff on the books and accepted the tax, the new tax levels, the penalties for going over the tax are so much higher now with this new deal that it's just not cost effective, and it's harder to get out of those contracts if you take them on and it doesn't work.
But also remember, OG, Siakam, RJ Barrett.
Yeah.
Those names were moved.
Those are pre-deadline trades.
They are pre-deadline trades, but those are big names that still got moved. Is it because it wasn't on the trade deadline that it wasn't a good trade year? Those are big moves.
No, certainly that's a fair point, but it's not just a label as like some bad thing. I don't think it has to be a bad thing, even though I've said the NBA media doesn't know how to cover the NBA.
They're pretty.
All they want to do is lead every podcast with, how about the Lakers, huh? And then who's going to get traded? Instead of like telling me, why is it working for Minnesota now this year?
Right, but wasn't last year.
But it didn't last year. Why is Oklahoma City took a step? Which, by the way, I know we talked about this, Swag. Oklahoma City, I know they got Gordon Hayward. Like, okay, I guess cool. I was a little surprised. I didn't want them to make a massive trade. They need depth at big, and they didn't do it. I was a little surprised.
Well, the question is, they must feel confident Hayward's going to be back.
He's 6'7", though. I'm talking about having real, kind of insurance at that position.
Who do you need to do that against other than Denver?
Minnesota. I mean, they've got
Rudy
Gobert
but Cat
and
plays
Cat.
on the perimeter.
Yeah.
And you're not worried
Same
about
thing with
this
Anthony
year.
Davis. He's a 3 or a 4. He just happens to be 6'11". The only guy that's really going down into the paint and pounding people is Jokic.
Well, I was surprised because clearly they want to gear it up and allow them to compete. I just thought that they would go make that move, and they didn't. The final one I want to get to here, or I got a couple here. Joe Cronin talking about what are the goals for the rest of a season? A miserable season. What are the goals?
Keep getting better day by day.
By day by day.
By day.
It was our approach going into it. Nothing's really changed. We have a lot of individual development and team development to go through. And, we have some really young, talented, capable guys that we're seeing good growth from. Just got to keep doing that. And at the same time, we've got to learn to play together. We've got to still get better defining and establishing our style of play.
This is the one that hacked me off. You haven't defined your style of play. What's Chauncey been doing?
Well, they're
not close.
That's it.
That was the indication to me. We had this conversation before I left. How much longer are you willing to be patient? How much longer are you willing to go through whatever process they're going through? Because it could be a long time, and there's no guarantee that you get to where you want to go when they say it's time to go all in.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know.
I was a little confused. I put up a question yesterday on the show page at the end of the show, and the way people read it was interesting. And I'm not a great writer at all, so I'm fully taking some responsibility.
You're doing great, buddy. You're doing
well,
great.
But a year ago they said, you're almost going to be questioning or offended by how much we're going to push our chips all in to build around Dame. And obviously that didn't happen, right? It went the other way. So I just put up, do you actually trust them when they say you're going to question or wonder why we're going so all in? When that move presents itself, however long that is, do you trust them to do it? And people are like, why would they do it right now? And I'm like, there's no timestamp on this question. This is just open-ended. Do you actually trust them to put their chips all in and go, here's 3 firsts and a young player. Give us this guy. He will add something to what we have. I don't know how based on what we've seen with this regime, previous regime, I don't know how you can say yes to that. Personally, it's not to say that Joe won't. It's just I can only go off what I've seen, and what I've seen is kind of the opposite. We're going to sell off our parts, and we're going to keep waiting for the right draft pick to land here, which maybe that's Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg will not be drafted until next June.
Right.
So that is another season of this, of blowing games to the Pistons because one player rolled his ankle and the rest of the guys playing not good enough to beat a Detroit Piston team that is one of the worst we've seen in the NBA in a long time.
I think I'm willing to give Joe a little more slack on this. And I think it's obviously different when you're dealing the superstar as opposed to wanting a superstar, dealing for a superstar. But I thought the Dame trade went well, all things considered. Like, I think the return he got for it was pretty good. Okay. So let's build on that.
But his position 3 months, 4 months prior to that was we're going to go all in for Dame.
Agreed.
And then it switched. And you can certainly say that's the right decision.
I think he had to switch. Like, I don't know if that's his call. Like not
to keep the 3rd pick in the draft, not move the 23rd pick in the draft.
Not that the high up said no, but that there wasn't anything on the table for him. If that's the case, then that's the case.
Anytime you don't make a good big trade, it's very easy to say, well, I'm not sure there was a lot there for him. That's kind of an out without knowing for sure if that's true or not.
My only hesitation on him is how long this Chauncey thing keeps going on.
Well, the Chauncey, I mean, he talked about Chauncey.
That's what's got to change.
He raved about Chauncey
If he's going to
yesterday.
hang on to Chauncey through this, that's when you're going to start
Chauncey's
to
a
lose.
5-year deal. It's year 3. He's not getting fired. He talked yesterday about how he's actually liked the growth and development that some of the young players have had with Chauncey. I'll play this final one. Just Quick asked him what he's made, and this is such a weird question to have to answer, but I understand why Quick would definitely ask it. How do you feel like you've done as the general manager?
Yes, I really like where we're positioned. I like where we're headed. I like what we're capable of. I like our team. I like our staff. I like our organization. I think we're well on our way to good things in the future.
I mean,
Well, what are you going to say?
yeah, I don't know.
I
how
hate where we are.
Yeah, no, he's not going to say that.
These picks aren't going to be that great.
I'm not even trying to highlight whether it was a good or bad answer. It's got to be a tough question to answer. Swag, how do you think you are as the Pilots play-by-play man? Mediocre, but getting better? No, you're going to be like, I'm good.
You know, my defense could get some improvement, and we're terrible in Spokane, but I'm getting there.
You know, the team's actually worse than me. I'm one of the MVPs of this deal.
But it's funny because you kind of mentioned it earlier, or I think it was Swag that said it. This team has no identity. And that identity comes from your coach, from your system. Like, what is it that you do? What is it that Portland does other than throw a bunch of kids out there and Jeremy Grant?
They play hard sometimes.
Sometimes, but like they don't even have that identity. That's what bothers me so much. And that's where I would say, okay, maybe not on Cronin if he believes in Chauncey that much. When Chauncey was a player, he had identity. All these teams that are good and these teams that are bad, they have identity. Look at Minnesota. Nobody believes they're going to go on a run, but at least I can tell you what they do.
I think overall it's when you're bad and you're building and you're tanking, but you're clearly not trying to win the most games, it's going to be hard to have an identity in that process. And the only thing that I would say, and then we'll go here, the only thing I'd say to that too is, as true as that is, at some point though, and this is year 3 for Chauncey, like, is year 4 going to be the year where you go, I know what style of play we are going to have. I know who we are. You have to, at some point, be able to answer that question.
Yeah.
There's only so long you can go without answering it. I don't like this anymore.